So what goes into the planning? What do you need to think about as you go? That's what I want to talk about for the next hour. I honestly have no idea what I'm going to do with the third hour. I looked at it and I thought, that's pretty thin, but it'll fill itself up. I assure you. What I would like to do in the last session next week is have people start talking to each other a bit. Or we can do breakout rooms in Zoom. We can have people here chat just a bit. But for right now, I mentioned this last time, but I want to get a little more into it. One of the problems with moving to a new country is we approached it in a way that is referred to as paradigmatic. That is, we have a view of what ought to be, and we expect that to be true almost everywhere we go. If you go on YouTube, you can find lots of videos where people say things like, I was really surprised that when we went to Spain, everybody spoke Spanish and no one spoke English. It was very difficult to communicate. Well, that's because they speak Spanish in Spain, except in the parts that don't. But anyway, you got to expect things are going to be different if you move somewhere else. And you have to assume that your paradigm of the world may not be suited to everyone's. Just yesterday, I heard some political figure, and I don't recall who, and I won't even say which side he or she was on. But what this person said was, we need to eliminate the social supports network here in the US that are attracting all the other people from the rest of the world. If we didn't have such a fine social support system, then people wouldn't come here. This person has a very odd paradigm of the world, because outside of the United States, socialized medicine, national pensions, that sort of thing, very common. And nobody's coming to the United States to get those. They're coming here to get work that pays really, really well, that they can use to send money somewhere else. That's true, and you could argue a point there. But your view of how the world works because of your experience in the United States is probably a bit skewed. And you have to expect things are going to be different. Now, sometimes those differences are really extreme, like they speak a language you don't understand at all. Sometimes they're just odd. And I tell stories a lot, and I may have told this story before, but I don't remember that I did. Did I talk about getting license plates? I did. Canadian license plates? No. Okay, good. I have a friend who's Canadian. In fact, I'm going to go see her next week. And I mention that partly because I won't be here for the third session. I will be in Calgary participating via Zoom. Laura, I hope, will be here to host things. But that'll make the experience only slightly different, mostly for the people in this room. The Zoomers won't notice a whole lot. But anyway, Amy, remind me to take my camera with me, because this thing does not have a camera on it. But anyway, this Canadian friend I know from my time at the University of Oregon. She came down and was a student along with me in a program there. And at a point, she decided she needed to get American license plates for her car. So she had American insurance for her car, as one does, because one has to. So she went to her insurance agent and said she needed to get license plates. And they said, that's probably right. And she said, but I'm here to get them arranged. And they talked past each other for half an hour, because she thought you go to your insurance agent for license plates, and the insurance agent knew you go to the DMV. And that's the sort of little subtle stuff that jumps up and bites you, because you just don't realize the difference. I did mention, I'm quite sure, that she went to the international students office, and they said, you're not international, you're Canadian. But anyway, your vision of how the world works is going to have to be flexible if you move to another country. It needs to be flexible if you just go visit another country. But it has to be even more flexible if you're planning to stay there. It's important to recognize that every immigrant is also an emigrant. And that's an important perspective. You're not just going somewhere. You have to plan for the leaving as well. Okay? It's very important to me, as we prepare, my wife and I, to move to Bulgaria, that we plan for leaving. So one of the things we're doing is we're going to Calgary to see a friend who we haven't seen in a while, and who we won't see probably for quite a while, because she won't be going to Bulgaria. So that's the sort of thing we're doing. We went to Virginia to visit her sister, and then from there, South Carolina to visit my brother before we leave. We just yesterday decided on a date and location for a farewell party in Salem, which you'd be welcome at, but it's a long drive. Any of you would be, it's all no host anyway. So if you want to come, that's fine. But anyway, so we're planning the leaving portion of the show as well. We also have to plan for arriving there. You have to have a place, you know, it's bad to just arrive and wish you had a place to sleep that night. It can be challenging. So what do you tell your friends? Some people say, I want to leave the US. I'm just tired. I'm not comfortable with it here. That's not a good thing to say. People get upset with you when you say that. I want to live more cheaply. People there get upset with you when you say that. But your friends too will say, well, you know, it's not that bad here. It's not that cheap. It's elsewhere. That's not a good thing either. I really have focused on we're looking for an adventure. My wife hates it when I say my second to last adventure. But anyway, I kind of view it that way. I'm older than I used to be, and I know it's not going to last forever. So this really is probably my second to last adventure. And I'm looking forward to it in that way. I'm expecting things to be radically different from my experience here. And to the extent that I decide that it's not what I want, I'll change my mind. We've agreed that if either one of us decides Plovdiv, Bulgaria is just not where we want to be, we're going to say so. And then we'll try to talk each other out of it. Not out of Plovdiv, but out of leaving. The United States is not going anywhere. It's going to still be here. It'd be different. It always is. I'm also saying this is not likely forever. When we first started talking about it, we used the arbitrary figure of about 10 years. We figured maybe 10 years to go there. That was when we expected to move when I was 62 and she was a child. You weren't a child, but she's markedly younger, and it took a while for her to retire. Now, maybe not 10 years. I don't know what kind of shape I'll be in 10 years and whether I want to stay. Yesterday, I visited my physician and she said, you're in great shape. But she also said, what's the healthcare system like in Bulgaria? And I said, I really haven't looked. I've looked at it, but I haven't tried it. What we hear from others is it's pretty acceptable. Some of the hospitals are not in such great shape, but the staff are brilliant and the machines are all current. One of the things you have to worry about is what's it going to cost. Recently, someone was polling. Amy and I are part of a bunch of Facebook groups about moving to Bulgaria and US expats in Bulgaria and a more generic expats in Bulgaria and living in Plovdiv and all these different things. Somebody on Facebook said, where did you get insurance? And most people were offering up names of insurance companies. And one guy offered up, I don't have insurance. I went for an MRI the other day and I had to pay cash. Now, how many of you would take an MRI cash in the United States? No. $220 that cost him. So costs are different elsewhere. They're not trying to pay for the machine because they already paid for the machine with government funds because they're using it in their social healthcare system. They don't need to get all the money back on this. They're charging you for the time it took somebody to run an MRI. So things are different in different places, and it's important to recognize that. I mentioned the socialized medicine in Bulgaria. We're not eligible for 5 years. So we will have to have some kind of insurance or bear the cost on our own. So don't expect that you're going to arrive in Uzbekistan or wherever and suddenly be part of their socialized medical system. You're not, almost certainly. If you need emergency care in most socialized systems is covered, regardless. So if I get hit by a car, fall down the steps, or Amy decides she doesn't want to be with me anymore and then things change, and I need a hospital because of that, the ambulance is free. The emergency medical care is free, regardless of insurance status. That's not universal anyway. I mean, it's different between here and Bulgaria. Well, it's also different between Bulgaria and Romania and Greece, and they're all part of the EU and they all bump into each other. So you'll need to check into what your requirements will be, what your expectations are for medical care. Not that anyone in this room will ever need medical care. It's not a consideration of anyone in retirement.
Yeah.
Shirley, what's your question?
Being over there for 5 years. Do you maintain your Medicare payments here?
That is a very important question, and I'm going to talk about that. I have that coming up on a slide though, so I don't want to throw it all. I want to talk more about relocation. We'll talk about Medicare in a moment. There are essentially three types of relocation. There are others, but these are the most common. One's immigration. That is, I'm moving, I plan to stay, I'm going to be here a while, at least, if not a long time. An immigrant typically has no idea when and if they're going back to wherever they came from, and may never. Then there are expats. And expats, short for expatriates, are people who do intend to go back. So everybody who works for the US State Department, for instance, actually is considered an expat. They're working for the United States State Department in some other country, and they're there, and they're going to be there for a certain amount of time. And they know they're assigned, just as military staff are, they're assigned for a tour. And they may renew that tour, but still, they know when they're leaving. If you're referring to yourself as an expat, think people will assume you're leaving, because that's what an expat is. If you're planning to be there, you're an immigrant, and you should deal with it that way. Finally, there's another way of slow travelers is becoming really very popular. What a slow traveler is, it's a travel system that lets you just stay a while, but not a few days. So if I wanted to go to the European Union, I can stay for 90 days just on my US passport with nothing special. On the 90th day, I have to leave, and I have to be away for 90 days before I can come back. It doesn't actually work that way, because in 6 months, I can be there 90 days, which means I can go for a week in January and a week in February and 2 weeks in March and 3 weeks in April, and then I got to start counting, because pretty soon I'm going to hit 90 days and they're going to say, hey, not only can you not be here anymore, you also can't come back for X number of months or years. Yes, question back there.
You're talking about Europe, 90 days?
The European Union is largely 90 days.
Oh, because Canada is six months.
Yes, different countries, different.
Yeah,
Everything's
okay.
different. Check with the country you're interested in. But European Union, it's 90 days in any 6 month period.
You count the 90 days of being out of the EU from the first day you were in or the last day you were in?
That's a really good question. She's asking, when do you count? Well, let me introduce an alternative confusion factor, and then we'll try to help you straighten that out. Actually, it's not the EU that's making these rules. It's the Schengen zone. Have you heard of the Schengen zone?
No.
Yes.
The Schengen zone includes most of, but not all of, the European Union. So Romania and Bulgaria, for instance, are in the Schengen zone for driving, but not for airplanes. If you're inside the Schengen zone, as soon as you get in, you are allowed to travel anywhere you like, just on your passport, and that's where the 90 days is. This is most of Europe. It includes a couple of countries, for instance, Switzerland is one of them, they're not in the European Union, but they are in the Schengen zone. So you have to, but to get your question answered, you look up the page for the Schengen zone and you start putting in the dates you were in Europe and the dates you weren't in Europe, and it will tell you when you have to get the heck out. So they have built a website specifically to tell people when they need to leave. So all of this stuff requires some thought.
What about the
It's on its own. I don't know what they're. It is not in the Schengen zone. Another thing that's not is Turkey's not. So if I'm in Bulgaria, I can be in Bulgaria for 90 days, drive over to Turkey for a while, and then maybe Egypt. I wouldn't drive from Turkey to Egypt, by the way. Not a good day for that. But anyway, you can go to a few other places. You don't have to come back to the United States. It's literally, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. It's the classic line at the end of the bar. But you are limited. I mean, honestly, you have, short of China, you have more places you can go on your American passport than anyone else in the world. China's, for some reason, is a little bit better. There are a few other countries that accept you without visa. But if you're going to stay more than 90 days in any of those countries, you almost certainly will need a long-term stay visa.
I'd still like to ask a question. If you are an EU citizen as well as a US citizen, is that going to apply? can I leave on my US passport and then run around Europe and stay over 90 days with my Irish passport?
Yes. So just for those of you on Zoom to make sure you got the question. If you're both a US citizen and an EU citizen, which by the way, I described my 22-year-old daughter who was born in Bulgaria, can I travel to the EU and be there on my EU passport as opposed to my American passport? And indeed, they will be upset with you if you travel internally on your American passport. You would show your American passport to leave the US and grab your European passport from that point forward until you're trying to re-enter the US. We got in trouble once for trying to transport our daughter across from one country to another in Europe on her American passport because it shows she was born in Bulgaria, and the Bulgarians on the exit said, "Why is she traveling on an American passport? She's Bulgarian." And I said, "What's it going to take to fix this?" And they said, "Go ahead." But anyway, there's got to be a solution to every problem. We didn't even have her Bulgarian passport with us.
How tracked is it for making sure you're only staying 90 days? How closely do they track?
My understanding is it used to be that you could actually stay 90 days in Bulgaria, drive to Romania for an afternoon, drive back to Bulgaria, and your 90 days started again. That was when they were using stamps, and people would overlook stamps and get confused. Not anymore. You're not getting stamps anymore when you travel in Europe. I don't know anything about traveling elsewhere, by the way. I've been to Cairo once, but other than that, I can't tell you much about other places. But I want to tell you that there are restrictions, and that's what I want you to take from this. Now they're doing it all electronically, and they are down to the day. If you are wrong, you're wrong. And they will bar you for some time. But to get to Bulgaria, we could go for 90 days and stay just on our passports, and then we're out. What we had to do was to get we will be applying for a visa, a long-term stay visa, which is 6 months. And then when we get that, then at any time, but no less than 2 weeks before that expires, we apply for a 1-year residency card. That pattern is fairly typical elsewhere. Visa, long-term stay visa, then a residency card. But I can't tell you those numbers for any of them. But it's clear that Laura has something she wants to say. If you want to be on camera, you're going to have to come up here.
Oh, that's okay. They can see me on Zoom. So,
Okay.
I was just going to say for Mexico, it's a little bit arbitrary. When you go into Mexico, it's really up to the immigration officer how long they let you stay. They ask how long you're planning, but they could give you 180 days. They could give you 6 days. You know, if I say I'm going to be there for 11 days, they might give me that exactly. They might not. So you definitely need to keep track of that. In Mexico, they do still use stamps all the times we've gone so far. And last time I was in Europe, they did, but maybe that's changed.
Well, some places are still stamping, but it's all electronic as of January.
Oh, nice. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a little bit arbitrary. And I know for Mexico, on a temporary residency, we can leave, or we can be there for 180 days, and then we have to just go across the border and we can come right back. So it just really depends. And then once with permanent residency, of course, you can stay as long as you want. So, yeah.
What I want you to mostly take from this is they're entitled to write laws however they like. We do. And our laws may appear arbitrary and capricious. They're still their laws. And you need to pay close attention. If you go to the embassy website for any country you're interested in, they'll be able to tell you exactly. I mean, guarantee you there's a web page that explains all of this for that particular country. To hit the slow travelers point though, most countries aren't in these agreements. The Schengen zone covers most of Europe, not nearly all, but most. But if you want to just spend a month to 3 months in one place and then move on to another place, there are a lot of people who are doing that you could be partnered with. I mean, you're just falling into a very interesting pattern. What it means is you've got to be able to put everything you own in a backpack and get on an airplane or a train and go somewhere else and plan to be there for several weeks. But with the advent of Airbnb and similar services, not that difficult to do that. Airbnbs all over Europe, they're throughout Southeast Asia, they're everywhere that you might want to go. So you could be a slow traveler and never settle in. Yes.
A few years ago, I was traveling on a bicycle through Europe. And I flew through borders and there was nobody there. No one stamped my passport. No one even looked. Just
Yeah.
rolled on through. How does that work?
Well, it depends on if you get caught. Because if you were in the country and don't have a stamp saying I entered the country, then they are kind of curious about that. But you're exactly right. They can't guard every possible road, every farm road out in the middle of nowhere. And for the most part, the borders are less obvious there. I mean, I don't know if you realize it. The border between the United States and Mexico is pretty clearly demarcated when you're standing at it. The border between Canada and the US, they've cut a swath through the trees and all the, seriously, there's one continuous border from Lake Superior to Washington. But when you get to the border between the US and Canada because everything's been cut down. So you get to the border between Turkey and Bulgaria, there's a fence, and about 15 feet away, there's another fence. And on top of both is barbed wire, and they're about 20 feet tall. And there are certain areas in Bulgaria where you can go to see the literal Iron Curtain, the wall that was between the Soviet bloc and NATO, which Turkey has been a member of for a very long time. It's there. So borders are sometimes very obvious, and sometimes, I mean, when you go from Bulgaria into Greece, there are places you probably could drive over. It's certainly places you could walk over without thinking about it. You probably recall there were some hikers a while back that hiked from Iran or from Iraq into Iran and got picked up, and life did not go well for them. But there was no indication that they had crossed the border. Then they admitted they intended to cross the border. But anyway, it's an interesting thing. Slow travel is really catching on, though. If you don't want to go to the trouble of settling in somewhere, you can really see and enjoy a lot of places. But it would wear me out. I don't think I could do that. So, what about immigration? Come on. It's not going. There we go. You move to a new country politically distinct from your own. You plan to never return to your own country, and you may seek citizenship, but maybe not. I have no intention of ever voting in a Bulgarian election. I don't expect to seek citizenship. 6-month visa, 1-year residency for 5 years, 5-year residency. Now I'm at 10 years, and then I could apply for citizenship. I don't imagine I will. Or I could buy a business investing, I think it's $1.4 million right now in any Bulgarian business, and suddenly I'm a citizen. And there are a couple of other things you can do too. And that's not uncommon. Somebody last week was talking about the golden visa for Portugal, and they have a similar thing. I know Italy does too. You can currently buy houses in Italy for $1 or $2. I could point you to houses in Bulgaria that are less than $20,000 that are actually pretty well located and nice. So, I mean, there's reason to consider it, but I don't see citizenship as being particularly useful in Bulgaria. Expats move to a new country just as immigrants, but they plan to return at a particular time, and they're not interested in citizenship, but just long-term residency. And then slow travelers move from one country to another on a frequent basis. We're not talking 2 or 3 days here, but rather you move in and stay for a couple of weeks or a month or 2 months.
I have now. Will this be, you'll send it?
The PowerPoint? Yes, I should probably put my PowerPoint on linked from that page. I can't either. Slow travelers have no interest in citizenship or residency. They often move because of visa requirements. So they'll spend that 90 days and then suddenly, well, it's time to go. We have to move. So they go somewhere where they get to restart their visa. As I said, the American passport without visa will take you an awful lot of places, more than you could probably visit in your lifetime. So there's no reason to be worried about getting visas if what you want to do is just be there for a short time and get to know the place and then say, I'm going to try someplace else. Unfortunately, and this is true for most countries as well, if we moved to Bulgaria for 30 days and thought, we kind of like this, let's stay, which we're already planning to. And then we decide we want to get a visa to stay, we have to go home. And then get the visa and then come back. So it's not something, you have to do it at the Bulgarian embassy or consulate in the country where you normally reside. And that's true of most countries. They expect you to go home and come through a normal, by the way, if you think any of these rules are unreasonable, just think about what it takes to become an American. Yeah, it's hard.
Do most embassies, are they mostly in big cities? Like,
The embassy is universally in Washington, D.C., but the Bulgarians have a consulate in Seattle, no, LA, DC, New York, and Chicago. So I can go to any of those. Although actually for the visa, I have to go to LA because they serve this area. But we heard Mexico has consulates everywhere, right?
Yeah, we've got consulate, I mean, there's one in Portland, San Francisco, San Jose, I mean, if you look online, there's probably 20 or 30 in the United States for Mexico. And I wanted to say, let's see, you were saying something a second ago, what were you talking about? Oh, well, I'll think that I'll come back to it.
Okay. So yeah, if you want to get the visa, you have to go either to the embassy or to a consulate, which is essentially a sub-embassy. They don't do foreign policy, they manage bureaucratic things. So if you, it's like the US wouldn't go to a consulate to talk over a problem with Bulgaria, they would go to the embassy or call to the embassy. We're the US, nobody, we don't go to see anybody.
How long is your visa good for?
The visa we're applying for is 6 months. But then we, as I said before, anytime during that 6 months, but no later than 2 weeks before, we can apply for a 1-year residency. And that is self-renewing as long as we don't get arrested. And that's quite literal. Amy and I had to go to the FBI and get reports on our criminal activities. And they have to be translated to Bulgarian, and I don't know how to do that.
I just wanted also just for Mexico, in case anybody's thinking of that, for temporary residency there, like we can apply for it right now, even if we're not planning to go live there right now. It lasts for 4 years, and at that point, if we've maintained it during that time, then it automatically converts to permanent residency. Depending on which consulate you go to in the United States, it's a different income requirement. The cheapest is San Francisco at like $3,500 a month. Other ones are up to $5,500 a month. It just depends on where you go. It's interesting, but it is listed there. There's websites online that you can look at it and it'll tell you. And there's a really interesting thing that's happening in Mexico right now. If you're there on a temporary visa and it has expired and you're still there, if you traveled to Mexico before 2022, you can automatically get your temporary residency without the income requirements. I don't know why they're doing that right now, but it's like a little loophole that's happening right now. So
the biggest thing to take away from this is investigate the country you're interested in, because it's going to be different. It's really important to check out that particular country. Don't assume somebody who went to China is telling you the truth when you want to go to Peru. It's going to be different. Okay. Peru is nice, by the way. That's what I hear. These are some terms you really ought to know. A visa is an authority to be in the country. It's granted by the gaining country. It's not part of your passport, although it will be stuck into your passport. But the passport is your country saying who you are. The visa is that country saying, and welcome home. You can come and visit us. Used to be you had to have visas to go almost anywhere for almost any time, but not so much anymore. Residency versus citizenship. Residency is not citizenship. Just as when the Oregon DMV registered a whole bunch of people to vote who weren't citizens, you don't get the rights of citizenship just because you live in the country. You get the rights of citizenship once you've been granted citizenship. Residency simply means you can live there and enjoy the benefits of the cuisine and all the other things, but you don't have the benefits of citizenship. Which, by the way, means you need to know how to get a hold of the US Embassy. And you probably want to have their phone number stored in your phone because, by the way, that's good information, even if you're just traveling. But it's important that you be able to get to the embassy because they may well be able to help you out in the case of a problem. Apostille. This is a term that most people get confused. It is not the word apostle. It is apostille. And what an apostille is, you get a document notarized to say, yes, these are your signatures. It's a true document. Then you get an apostille, which is part of a treaty among international governments, saying not only has it been stamped by someone who recognized your signature and proved you were you, that person was authorized to stamp it. Does that make sense? It's essentially notarizing the notary, not you. It doesn't say you're a good person. It says the notary is who they claim to be. And just the other day, somebody said, I got to the Serbian border moving to Bulgaria and they turned us around because one of our documents had not been apostilled. This is critical anytime you're dealing with a foreign government. Have you gone through that with Mexico at all?
No, not with that, but you definitely need to understand okay, in Mexico, they have notarios, which basically act as an attorney. They don't just simply verify signatures. And so like when we bought our property there, we went to a notary to look over all of the property contract, that sort of thing. And so you need to recognize that in different countries, they have different responsibilities.
Yeah, that's also true in Bulgaria, by the way, that notaries have significantly more responsibilities. They're not quite attorneys, they can't go to court, but they can write a contract for you, for instance, where you wouldn't go to a notary here to ask for a contract. So anyway, so there are some differences, but apostille is very important. When you see that something needs to be apostilled, it needs to be done, or they aren't going to accept your document. By the way, you get that done through the Secretary of State's office up in Salem, which may mean a drive to Salem.
Are you saying that you have the apostille is done by the Secretary of State?
Yes. So because they register all of the notaries in the state, they know who is a notary and who isn't. So they will verify that this notary was authorized to notarize it. And by the way, it's really cheap and they do it in seconds. I went in recently, Amy and I needed a couple of things notarized. Our PERS statements, as a matter of fact. We had to go to the PERS office in not Portland, but up in the Portland metro area to get our statement saying, yes, this is how much you make per month, notarized. Then we had to drive to Salem and go to the Secretary of State's office and get that apostille to say, yes, that notary was a real notary. And now the government on the other end will accept it. That sounded like an awful lot of time, but this seems to be a tripping point for a lot of people. So I want to make sure you know about it. If I leave, what about the US? It will probably be fine without you. If you're concerned about the elections and that sort of thing, go right ahead and vote. Keep voting. You don't have a problem with voting while outside the country. The Secretary of State's office will accept mail voting. That's foolish. It'll always be late. They will accept a fax. That's yesterday's news. By the way, did you know that fax machines actually predated the telephone by about 35 years? Most people think it's a fairly modern, arcane tool. But anyway, they will accept some email now. You can email vote in Oregon. So you're not losing out on that. Your citizenship is fully retained. The US has no problem with you being a dual citizen, in fact. The other country may. And I just heard recently, somebody was saying they had to give up their US citizenship because they moved to another country. The other country may demand that of you, and that's something to be concerned about if you're trying to be a citizen there, if you value your US citizenship. But the US government has no problem with you being a dual citizenship, and you can keep citizenship here and have citizenship elsewhere. You certainly can keep citizenship here and be a resident elsewhere. What about Social Security? Now we're getting to the nitty-gritty. You will continue to receive Social Security just as normal. And if you've got it being deposited into a bank in the US, I intend to fully continue with that. It's going to show up in that bank and I will transfer it from that bank to another account that I have access to more easily. Other pensions will continue as well. Our PERS pensions, Amy and I both retired from the state government, we will get those pensions as well. There's no reason that those will be interrupted in any way. This is where the concern comes in, though. Medicare is a concern. Now, I know all of you are too young to be interested in Medicare, but it's a big deal for me. I pause at this moment to say this is not legal or financial advice. This is what I know to be true. If you have concerns about this, you need to talk with somebody who actually knows about it. But this is what Medicare will tell you is true. Part A is free. You can keep it forever without ever thinking about it. There's no reason to ever drop it or anything like that. Part B depends on your life plans. Part B is the doctor portion as opposed to the hospital portion. Part B does cost you. My life plan is that I will come back to the United States about once a year and see a physician I'm very comfortable with. That's my plan. I don't know that it's going to be what I hold to, but I'm going to keep Part B. It's not terribly expensive and it's worth it to me. Part C is a total waste of money because you cannot use Medicare outside the United States of America. If you're in Europe and have something happen that you think Medicare would cover in the United States, it doesn't matter, they're not covering it there. And then finally, Part D has special provisions for returning. Important to note, both B and D, if you leave and then try to return, you get what they refer to as they don't refer to it properly. You get a lifetime penalty for having dropped parts B, C, or D. If you don't handle it properly. If you haven't had insurance in the last 6 months before you pick up Part D, you have to pay this lifelong penalty. It's a higher rate every month for the rest of your life. If you leave the country and drop it, which is fine, when you return, you have from a month before you return to 2 months after you get back to get into Parts B and D again without penalty. I don't expect you to memorize all this. In fact, it probably would be a bad idea because the Social Security Administration will change all this on a whim. But the point is, you need to keep track of it. If you're concerned with Medicare, you need to keep track of it and make sure you're making the right choices. So if you know you're coming back, you can go to Medicare.com and pardon me, .gov. Don't go to Medicare.com. That would be bad. Go to Medicare.gov and you can say, I'm coming back. I need Medicare's Part B and D, and buy right in. And you have to show them evidence that you've been outside the country. And that's why you didn't have the coverage. But Medicare is of no use to you outside the US. It's good in all the US territories, and you can go to Puerto Rico and use it, that sort of thing. But if you're in Europe, if you're in Southeast Asia, if you're in Saudi Arabia, it's no good to you.
Well, do you have to, for Part D, do you have to, be on the, before you leave, do you have to set that up, that you're leaving?
You would want to cancel the coverage.
Okay.
So that's what I intend to do in February. I'm just going to call them and say, stop charging me this. I'm leaving the country and I won't need this service. I don't know what evidence you have to provide that you've been outside the country, by the way. I haven't lived that yet. So do you have another question?
Yeah. So sometimes you will have a secondary insurance, with Medicare is the primary.
Mhm.
Secondary.
Yeah, that's what the Part C is all about. Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing about that is, if you have a plan that covers you if you're traveling. In other words, in my plan, if I have a problem and I'm in Europe, if I get the receipts, et cetera, I can apply back to my secondary and they'll cover that. But if I don't have Medicare, I don't have my secondary.
Well, you will always have Part A. Part A is just there. You can't withdraw from Part A. So you would always have Medicare. But I would be concerned, there's a difference between I'm living in Europe and I'm traveling in Europe. And I think your insurance might fail on you if they find out you're actually living in Europe.
What if you're a slow traveler?
Well, there you go. I don't know. But check with your insurance company, yeah. But I do intend to at least once a year come back and have a physical and talk to my doctor and all that. So having Medicare is not a bad thing. But I'm not paying for Part D. It's too expensive.
Did you look into like worldwide coverage insurance?
We have looked into that. We haven't made any decisions yet. We actually have to purchase healthcare. I guess your question probably came through. I was just realizing I'm not repeating questions. We have to have insurance in Bulgaria in order to move there. That's one of the list of 9 things we have to do so we can be there, because they don't want us to be dependent on their social system. So they have 2 parallel healthcare systems. One's private, the other's socialized. And we would have access only to the private healthcare system. We won't have access to the social system. By the way, this isn't true of Bulgaria, but my wife and I went to Turkey in April. You would not believe the hospitals they've been building in Turkey. They're counting on medical tourism there, and they have phenomenal hospitals. So depends on where you're going. Hospitalization could be a good thing. I mean, it could be well done. It's never a good thing, but it could be well done. Go ahead, Amy.
Global insurance. We have done.
Wait, yeah. So she's talking about global insurance now.
And you're sleeping, that's what I,
Okay.
I worry about insurance, right? I really. So we've looked at it, and it's like together. Can be extremely expensive. And so you have to really you really have to do your cost benefit analysis on that, because the plans that you may have here in the States, you think, oh my gosh, I have to replicate that abroad. You may not need to. I mean, I can get a $3,500 MRI at Ashland Community Hospital with a $600 out of pocket versus $221 out of pocket with no insurance coverage. So it really depends upon where you're going and what insurance options are.
Yeah, the insurance in other places, and certainly true in Bulgaria at least, is for catastrophic things. They're not buying insurance for the daily I'm going to the doctor, because it just isn't necessary. It's that inexpensive. So you have to do as she says, a cost benefit analysis on what coverage you actually need. Moving is challenging. It's difficult whether you're moving down the block or internationally. Have anybody ever moved locally inside the same town and thought, oh, this should be a lot easier than when I moved across the country? And it isn't. It's just amazing. You still have to pack everything. You have to unpack everything. Moving is inconvenient, certainly. It's tiresome, it's confusing, it's costly, and it's hard. It is difficult. In this case, and I talked about this some last week, but I want to reiterate the point, you're going to get rid of a bunch of stuff. Whether you're slow traveling, immigrating, whatever your status, you're going to need to get rid of a bunch of stuff or store a bunch of stuff. And storing a bunch of stuff is really expensive. Just as an example, don't listen to this part, Amy. I've had a conversation with Amy and her closest friend recently. We have a small utility trailer full of camping gear. We add food to it and we're camping. That's just that simple. It really works out nicely. We're paying $165 a month to store that trailer, and Amy doesn't want to lose it because she wants to be able to go camping when we come back to the US in 10 years. Now, first, I'll be 77 years old and I'm not sleeping in a tent anymore. But anyway, that aside, $165 a month, even for a year, would buy a bunch of that equipment again. And it'd be new instead of old. So think about whether what you're keeping is something you're going to need at any point in the future or not. Moving is going to be a challenge for you. We're moving in suitcases on airplanes, and we're just taking clothes. We also will take we have some artsy things Amy likes. I'm not into art that much. We have a few kitchen things that we'd like to have that we'll be taking with us. But for the most part, we're taking clothes. And so if anybody needs a Mini Cooper or a Subaru Outback, those are both available. So we've already done a lot of it, but it's going to be challenging for you. Where are you going to go? You should identify places to move, not a place to move. Now, we actually kind of settled on Bulgaria early. The first comment when we heard it, we found ridiculous. When Patrick, our Bulgarian private guide, That's his company name, just in case you want to go to Bulgaria. When Patrick suggested you guys should retire here, you could live like kings on your retirement. We said, oh, sure. And 2 years later, we were planning it. So, but we thought we wanted to move to Varna, which is right on the Black Sea coast. Beautiful 15 miles of sand beaches, just phenomenal. What a wonderful place. Shuts down completely in the winter. You can't get into a restaurant in the winter because it's just, everybody goes away. So it turns out that's not a really great place to go. Similarly, Patrick said, well, you know, if it was me and I didn't live in Varna already because he does, I would choose Plovdiv. So we started checking it out. Most people who move to Bulgaria either move to the big city, capital of Sofia, which is 1.6 million of 6 million people. So a huge, more than a fifth of the population live in that one city. That's too big for me. But Plovdiv, 400,000, it's like, so think about what it is you need, is what I'm trying to say. But think about multiple places. Know what you want. Can't overstate this. Yesterday, I told you I went to see the doctor, and the woman who checked me in, checked my blood pressure, all that stuff, you know, says, so I said, I'm moving to Bulgaria soon, and I need to get printouts of my prescription so that I've got the actual name and dosage so I can find out how much they're going to cost in Bulgaria. And she said, oh, have you visited there? And that's not an unreasonable question because people do move without ever having visited. I love Paris in the movies, so it must be a wonderful place. I want to move there. My understanding is it is a wonderful place if you're in the right spots. But like any big city, it has places that aren't that pleasant. Visit, be there a while, do the slow travel, maybe spend 3 months. To learn more about places, search the internet. The internet knows everything. I really recommend YouTube videos. I don't like to read, never have enjoyed reading. But I love watching videos, and I've watched a lot of videos. I would recommend, if you're interested in a particular place, watch videos referred to as walking tours, because the walking tours often no narration at all. They just walk through the city and show you what it looks like. Similarly, we ate our way across whatever the country is, shows you the cuisine, and when they start serving tripe soup, a delicacy in Bulgaria, and you think, I don't think I like tripe, and I've never even tried it, but I'm not going to try that one. If everything sounds like that to you, it might not be the place for you. Tripe soup, no, but most of what they serve is really delicious, in my opinion. I will mention that this is internationalliving.com, and oh, that's unfortunate. Thank you for calling me on that. So I have to hit share and say I want this one instead. And I have to hit share now. Is that better? No, I did choose it.
Yep.
Everybody on Zoom's getting it, but you're not getting it. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Let's do it this way. That was a lot of trouble, don't you? That's just showing off I know technology.
Now we can't see it on Zoom.
That's okay, I'll put it back.
Okay.
This International Living's website, come on, I gotta find how to get my mouse back. There we go. They have available to you Are you seeing it on Zoom now?
Yep.
Okay. They have available to you a place finder. So you could put in information that you find appealing, and they'll tell you which countries match what you're looking for. There's another one called Expatsy, EXPATSI. Expatsy also has a similar place finder. Unfortunately, before they send you the results, they'll ask for your email address. So give them that fake email address that you never actually use, because they will send you emails over the course of the next few days trying to get you to pay more attention to them. And if you don't have that fake email, I recommend that. An email you can use occasionally.
I will say that International Living, I joined that for a while. You will get a lot of emails from them, a lot of promotions. They have fantastic information. They have a magazine that's been around for decades, I believe.
Yeah.
But you will get a lot of emails from them. And yeah, just be prepared for that.
You can do the survey on where you might want to move without giving them an email address. But I would recommend that if you're actually interested in International Living, you should subscribe. It's a very interesting magazine. Amy and I have been subscribed for quite a number of years, and I went back to where I was, are you seeing on Zoom with that?
This, yes.
Yeah, good. International Living has a lot of information that's really useful, and I would recommend it if you're really interested in moving. It's not very expensive, and it's actually a print magazine. They do have an online subscription as well. Okay, any questions? That's the where. Now, let's get the mouse pointer back over here. There we go. It's important to know what you're looking for. What is it you're going there for? Last week I hit hard on know your why. Why are you doing this? But it's important to know your needs as well. The first thing most people ask us when we mention traveling to Bulgaria is, why are you going? And then the next thing is almost always, what about healthcare? How's healthcare there? You know, the US has great healthcare. That's what most people think. Most people will tell you the healthcare system in the United States is great. Check out healthcare. Check out things that are of interest to you. Check whether this place supports your plan. Is it going to give you what you think you need? This is Alina McLeod. Alina McLeod is a slow traveler and a YouTuber. Alina is about to move to Bulgaria, we think. We're just on the edge of our seats. We're waiting. She's waiting to get a visa to move to somewhere in Eastern Europe from Canada. She's from Saskatchewan. I don't remember what town. Tiny little town in Saskatchewan. But anyway, she's got a list of 15 things that are important to her in picking a country. And I'm going to play through this so you can, hopefully I am. There we go. No sound yet.
Let's get into my wants list of what I am looking for in a new potential home base. Point number one, and this one is definitely non-negotiable, and that is that it is safe for solo women travelers. Point number two, the cost of living is at least 50% less than in Canada. Point number three is a fairly stable government/currency, where they're not like changing policies all the time, or there's like a coup happening, or, you know, just a lot of chaos within the government. I don't want to move to a country and then just have things be all over the place. Point number four, I would prefer if taxes could be 15% or less. Point number five is no extreme climate risks. Point number six, you really need to check if your country and the country you are planning to move to have a social security agreement. Point number seven is that ideally, I would prefer that this country's immigration process isn't extremely complicated and that leads to permanent residency or citizenship. In my case, what I have to do is usually just apply for a long-term visa, which is what I am doing at this point in time, and then over a period of 5 to 10 years, depending on the country, you may qualify for permanent residency or citizenship. Point number 8 on my list is that I would prefer that English is widely spoken. Point number 9 is I want the ability to open a bank account in my new country. Point number 10 is that I would like to live in a hub city that has a very good airport with a lot of selection of international flights. Point number 11 is that my country of choice has good health care for a reasonable price. Point number 12 is that I would prefer to live in a city that is very walkable and that has very good public transport. Point number 13 is nature, the beauty of nature. Point number 14, and this one is also a given, it has to have fast and reliable internet. And last, but certainly not least, I would prefer that the country that I move to has at least somewhat of an international community, and that the locals are actually welcoming of foreigners. I don't want to stick out like a sore thumb, so ideally I would like it if there was at least somewhat of a, immigrant community from wherever else in the world. That is what I am looking for in a potential new home base.
That video was 30 minutes long. I cut it to 3. She gives a lot more information on each of those.
So fast, how do you spell the name?
Alina, Alina McLeod, McLeod.
Well, we could Google that and.
If you put her into YouTube, she has a whole channel.
Okay.
Amy and I found her when she was first traveling. She went to Bulgaria for 2 weeks and spent 3 months there.
Mhm.
And she just did videos all around Bulgaria. So we discovered her 4 or 5 years ago now. And she has quite recently decided she's going to leave Canada, which is hazardous. If you move out of Canada for more than 6 months in any 12, they cut you out of their social welfare system. That's why she had the point about your social welfare system has to be in partnership with Canada in her case. That's less an issue for those of us who've already retired because we're not so worried about making sure our pension benefits are continuing to grow and things like that. But still, it's a consideration.
You put this video
Yeah, I actually have already linked the longer video on the Learner Notes page. I'll link this one as well. This is really, I asked her if it would be okay to do this and she sent back a heart and said, I would so love if you did that. So, yes.
So you're not gonna be here next week, right?
I'm not
Well, I have
gonna,
the question again. Why are you moving to Bulgaria?
I'm going for the adventure of it, seriously.
You've been there and you apparently love it.
Yeah, we like the food, we like the atmosphere, we love the cafe culture. Sitting around all day drinking coffee I don't drink coffee, I drink tea. But sitting around all day is a perfectly reasonable way to spend my time in life. We have several friends we've already developed there, and who. It's an interesting thing, and we get 5 chat items. Are you tracking those? Okay. What's interesting, we are moving into a hotel which only has 7 guest rooms and an apartment. The apartment's brand new; they just added it on, and we're moving into that apartment. The guy who runs the hotel, when we said, yeah, we think we might want to rent your apartment, we were saying, we have to do things like find a doctor and all that. Oh, let me know. I'll drive you to the doctor. I'll take you to where, you would not get that from your landlord in the US. But we don't even know him that well. I mean,
So you've really experienced it out
yes,
there already.
we have. I think I had a hand, yeah, you, sir.
Are there any countries that don't welcome US transplants?
US. But no, there are some. I mean, there are some where people just are not likely to go. Central Africa is not very attractive to most people, for instance. But China is not that great at letting people in. We're in a better situation as retirees because if they're blocking entry, often it's because they don't want you to work and be a burden on their society, on their economy. When I move to Bulgaria, I will take nothing out of the Bulgarian economy and will instead be pouring money into it. So you can see why that would be appealing to a country. It's just all found money. I can't say offhand any country I've heard of that isn't taking Americans in, but it is not universal by any means. And some places are just not very pleasant about it. My understanding is that Britain is really difficult to become a part of if you're an American because they resent us. So.
Yeah.
So how is the cost of living in Bulgaria?
Well, the exchange rate between a US dollar and a Bulgarian lev, which means lion, by the way, and there are no lions in Bulgaria. But anyway, a Bulgarian lev is right now about 54, 55 cents on the dollar. So if I give you $1, or if I give you 55 cents, you would give me a lev back. The interesting thing is, and this really struck us, if you're shopping in the stores, all the prices look perfectly reasonable. Something you would expect to pay $14.99 for is $14.99. But that's only 55 cents worth of $14.99. So it really is about half the cost. Staying in places, living, like renting an apartment or something like that, there has gone up radically. And this is a political change because the Ukrainians have moved out of Ukraine often. I mean, many of them. And some of them came literally here to Ashland, and I know a couple, but many of them moved to Bulgaria thinking it's more similar to Ukraine than Romania is, and it's as close as we can be. So a lot of people moved from Ukraine to Bulgaria. and took up a lot of the excess housing. So that has pushed prices up. Things like that happen. When the Russians come to Bulgaria with their tanks and all, it might also push up prices. But actually, one of the interesting things is when the Ukrainians started moving in, the Russians all sold off their property in Bulgaria. It's a very common thing that people have vacation homes in Bulgaria because they have a beautiful Black Sea coast. The water gets to 84 degrees in the summer. You don't see that on the Oregon coast. I'm not trying to sell Bulgaria. I'm trying to tell you why people love it. But the Russians sold off their property. So that actually had a positive impact on the cost of living, the cost of renting. So there are things that happen all the time that are shifting things around. Yes?
Why would the Russians sell their vacation homes?
Because they weren't as welcome. Bulgaria is the only country in the world that voted to join the Soviet Union twice, and they were refused both times. They wanted to join the Soviet Union, but it would have been too difficult because there's a big gap. Other than the Black Sea, there would have been, Romania wasn't part of the Soviet Union. It wasn't even part of the Soviet bloc. It was kind of an odd situation. Anyway, my point is, the Russians felt very welcome in the past, to the point that there's one beach in Bulgaria that is covered with Cuban sand that the Russians picked up and transported there because they like the Cuban sand better than they like the Bulgarian sand. Seriously, they were that into it as a vacation destination. So this becomes more of a sales pitch for Bulgaria if I'm not careful. But what I'm trying to say is influences like that can have an effect. People say, well, aren't you worried about Ukraine being only literally 180 miles away at the closest point? That's not very far. You can drive that without making much effort in 3 hours. And we would be worried, except we're not. So we just choose not to be.
You talked about English being widely spoken. Well, English is widely spoken.
It is.
But Bulgaria, I don't think of the former Eastern Bloc as being that much English. So just curious.
When Bulgaria left the Soviet Union in 1990, they applied almost immediately for EU membership. They were granted EU membership like 2000. It happened pretty quickly. As soon as that happened, everybody in Bulgaria said, hey, this means I can get a job where they pay better in any of a dozen other countries. And Britain was very appealing. So people started learning English and gave up on Russian. So anybody over about 50, it's kind of pushing up a little bit now toward about 55, speaks Russian. But anybody under speaks English as their second language. And we've talked to people, you would not believe they're Bulgarians. They have American accents. It's just amazing. But they're young. But then again, they're staffing all the stores and things. So that's okay for us. If I were a Russian, I'd be disappointed because they're not speaking Russian anymore.
Expat communities, how to get in touch with them. I don't do Facebook, never have.
Okay, well, I can't help you then.
So I'm the only person that doesn't do it, but
I think there are 6
how
people.
you find out or get in touch with those communities. Say I moved to a country and I want to.
Oh, it's 12:05. I'm long. I'm sorry.
Get in touch.
No, it's still noon.
Get in touch with that expat community. How do I go about doing that?
That's a really good question. Facebook is how do I get in touch with expats in whatever country I'm interested in, or whatever countries, which actually would probably be better if you're looking at 3 or 4, contact the expat communities in multiple. Amy and I have been using Facebook heavily. You can get some information through YouTube. Some of the videos, there are people who are expats. There's an Irishman living in Varna, Bulgaria, who posts quite a bit about both Bulgaria and his expat experience there, which would get you some information about how to get in touch. If you're looking, oh, Amy has a tip. So,
Well, I think that
I really should probably sign off and say people can leave if they choose, but
experiences. There are some websites. I mean, he mentioned Expatsy. There are some websites that you can search for now as a community online outside.
well, International Living often has stuff in I don't know if you remember, but it used to be you would get a comic book and in the back they would have the sea monkeys and things like that. International Living has ads like that in the back for expat communities around the world. The concern I would have there is their advertising. They probably have something they want from you. So, but it's interesting following the Facebook groups because they just really tear up the country, and then they tear up each other for tearing up the country, and then it's just very interesting. I mean, I don't know if you're part of the Ashland, Oregon community, but apparently we don't need water treatment here. But anyway, on Facebook. Anyway, people go out with the weirdest stuff. So
I'm the same in the expat group that we're a part of for Months Neo Mexico. It's people, and that's the thing is people come with their US or Canadian expectations or whatever. And then there's a lot of complaining about the way things are where they go. So
yeah.
So if I were to do Facebook, which I don't know, but what would you put in there to
Just
get it?
if you go to the groups page and search for a country, you will find a whole bunch. But we're part of expats in Bulgaria, expats in Plovdiv. I gave up on expats in Varna because that was kind of confusing me because it was making me think, well, maybe it's the wrong city. But many of them, and these are not major cities. Varna and Plovdiv only have about 400,000 people each. So, but they have expat groups. So you would find the same to be true of almost anywhere you're considering going, almost certainly. Interestingly, and this is my last point, in Bulgaria, people tend to move into the villages rather than the cities. And I really don't understand that choice, especially, I can maybe understand it if you're in your 30s or 40s and you're looking to be off grid. But if you're retired, I wouldn't get more than 20 miles from a hospital. I wouldn't. I don't know what your choice is, but I certainly wouldn't want to be more than a short distance from a hospital or other medical care. So I want a city, but that's me. What's you? Did you have something more you wanted to offer?
I just wanted to say, I don't want to say the expat groups are all bad because they're not. There's such valuable information in the expat groups. They've been through the residency, immigration processes, that sort of thing. They know what the local medical situation is. It's a place to network and socialize. So definitely join those groups. Just be prepared that there can be the same types of issues in internet groups there that there are here.
Yeah. One of the most useful things you're going to get there is which companies are reliable for finding a place to live. There are a lot of shysters out there. So it is 10 after, and I'm sorry I kept you 10 minutes long, but we're not getting a mass walkout, so apparently it hasn't been a problem. But thank you one and all. I now know what I'm going to talk about next week because I still have about 8 slides. So all right, thank you. Appreciate it.
There's a
Thank you.
in Zoom. I don't know if you want to have the whole group listen, but you can maybe answer.
I can't get to the chat.
Okay.
So is it Susan who wants to talk?
No, Barbara.
Okay, if we've got a Zoomer who wanted to talk, you can jump right in.
Hi, Jan. My question was, what does the U.S. State Department say about traveling and living in Bulgaria?
They suggest they're at like, I think there are 4 levels and they're at level 2.
Yeah.
They're saying you need to be aware. I have never felt safer on the streets than on the streets of Bulgaria. Never a concern about anybody or anything. So it's just a very comfortable place to be.
Okay, and then I also wondered, what were the others, say, top 2 or 3 middle Central European countries you considered besides Bulgaria before making your choice?
Well, actually, we didn't consider so many. We have visited several. We visited Croatia. We would think Croatia would probably be number 2 if we were to go. We actually we went to Moldova. No, not Moldova. Macedonia, and we visited Greece. Greece is too expensive. Most people say Greece is hard to live in, but Croatia and Macedonia are Bulgarians will tell you that Macedonia is actually just West Bulgaria. It is that similar, but Croatia has such beautiful beaches and all. I don't know if you've ever seen anything from Croatia.
Yes.
It looks like a beautiful space and very similar culturally. So
And then one final question, I'm sorry. You mentioned earlier you had ties to Bulgaria. You mentioned a daughter being born there and so you have an emotional attachment to Bulgaria, it sounds like, to begin with. Yes?
Well, we could have, I don't know that we were that attached until we went back for her 15-year-old heritage tour and we got to see the place with a little more thought. We took 2 trips to adopt her and neither of those really showed us the country. But when we went back for the heritage tour for a couple of weeks, that really made a big difference. And I've been there 10 times now. Amy's only been there 9. She wants to make a competition. So, but we did have something of an emotional attachment, but I don't think it was strong enough. It would have been the basis for making this choice. It's really about a nice place to live, quiet, low cost, very pleasant people. We've really enjoyed our time there, but
Thank you for taking my questions.
you're certainly welcome.